Hey guys, what's happening? Greg here with the Vinyl Rundown. Got a very special guest for you today. We're going to talk about the history of music business in LA and a great bass player that you may know from several bands. I'm going to bring on Dave Provost from his underground bunker somewhere in Los Angeles, legendary bass player for the Dream Syndicate and the Textones and lots of other bands. Dave, how are you?
Good. From beautiful Culver City, California.
Beautiful Culver City, California. I'm in beautiful Woodland Hills, California, where it's 110 degrees right now.
Yeah.
So, Dave, you're like the legend of the sort of post-punk and 60s garage band sounds and indie rock and so on and so forth. Now, your credits are so long I don't know where to begin. Where do you want to begin this interview? Where should we start? The beginning, the end, the middle?
Well, I think you were talking about just the LA scene, and my first introduction to it was through my dad, who was a session arranger and worked on early TV, the Milton Berle Show. He did the arrangements, and so I'd tag along with him when I was a kid to recording sessions that he would either be doing the arrangements on or occasionally recording on. He played piano, so.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, my weekends, he would take me out to Gold Star Studios, and I'd play in the swing outside of Gold Star. There was a tree swing, and I'd be sitting out there, and all the musicians like Barney Kessel and Glenn Campbell and people like that would be hanging out in the parking lot waiting to be called in for a session. They knew they'd get more work by just sitting around. So I inhaled a lot of smoke, cigarette smoke from, as a kid. That's why I'm so healthy. But I
didn't know you started out with a sort of a studio session thing.
Well, I started being around that and
hanging out in that scene. That's cool.
Yeah, in United Western, and which was one of the first really state-of-the-art 8-track studios. But one memory that was really, really fun was my dad's best friend that he played piano with was this pop singer, Jerry Wallace, that had a bunch of hit records, pre-Beatle hit records on the pop charts. And he was going through a divorce and moved onto our couch in our house in Van Nuys. And during that time, he got called for a recording session that the music was already recorded, but he had to put a voice onto. So it was my first time at American Recorders on Ventura Boulevard with Richie Podler and Bill Cooper, who I would work with later and record with later. But it was a session for Hanna-Barbera that Jerry Wallace did for the Flintstones. For there's a town I know where the hipsters go called Bedrock, Twitch. And it's great. He somebody else did the voiceover for the character, but he did that song. So I got to watch him record that. And then as soon as I told the other kids in the neighborhood, they would come over and knock on our door on like Sunday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and Jerry would answer the door, in his bathrobe, and he'd walk out there, and the kids would say, "Sing it." And so he'd dare into, "There's a town I know where the hipsters go called Bedrock." As
a kid, you had a Flintstones living in your house. That's pretty cool.
Well, I don't know if that counts. He's not, Barney or anybody.
As far as the kids were concerned, he was close enough.
Well, yeah, that was their brush.
That was fame.
Great.
That was fame in those days.
Yeah, there were a lot of movie stars living in the Valley back then.
Well, I was just saying the Valley is really, most of America thinks the entertainment business is Hollywood and Beverly Hills, but it's really not. It's right here, the San Fernando Valley, Studio City, Universal Studios, Warner Brothers.
Completely, it always has been.
And all of my neighbors, I got a Warner Brothers producer next door and a makeup person here, and just a hardworking, it's a blue collar, but that's where they are. They're not, they're not megastars.
Yeah,
hardworking people.
I tell people if they hang out in Hollywood long enough, they will eventually work on a sitcom. And it's true, it's pretty true. no
I
matter
think
what you do in some
it's truer
capacity.
here in the valley, though. It's
Yeah,
truer
yeah,
here in the
it has been.
Van
Even,
Nuys, Studio City, where I live, Woodland Hills.
even the nightclubs in the valley, the Cinnamon Cinder, where the Beatles did their press conference before the Hollywood Bowl. There's tons and tons of famous nightclubs that exist, including the Country Club in the 80s, and just a lot of real.
You probably played at all of them.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, the Country Club is by my house in Reseda, and now I think it's either a Hispanic church or a boxing ring or something.
Yeah, but yeah, it definitely improved.
Yeah, the sound quality's better.
Yeah.
So after you were hanging out with your dad in the studio, you started playing what, guitar or bass? And
I was playing guitar. The first bands I was in were in the Valley in 1968 and 69. And we were kind of like we were playing popular songs, but we were also doing, 45-minute psychedelic jams. So that was, and then in 69, I started playing at Gazzari's in a club in Sherman Oaks called The Image. And so it was kind of like that was my introduction to nightclubs, and it was the tail end of the real psychedelia, because I'd been going to see a lot of bands like Jefferson Airplane and the Doors for some time. So that was what was so funny about the whole neo psychedelia Paisley Underground thing that I kind of had a taste of later, is that I was around for the first one.
Yeah, the psychedelic album thing is really huge with the vinyl collectors that I hang out with here on YouTube. They call it psych, but psychedelia, psychedelic. So, and you were on one of your bands was on one of the Nuggets compilations. Is that true?
Well, the Yellow Pages,
right?
They were on one of the later Rhino released, but they were the house band at the Hullabaloo Club. And they toured with the Animals. They toured with the Beach Boys. They were the first band to open for Pink Floyd when Syd Barrett was in the band, when the first LA show at Pink Floyd.
But were you with them then?
No, I wasn't, but I'm with them now. It's kind of revisionist history. I play with a lot of people from the 60s that I wasn't with then. But,
well, they managed to live this long, so that's good news.
Yeah, some of these bands you go out and there's no original members at all.
Didn't I see you open for the Yardbirds? And I don't even remember who was in the Yardbirds at that time. That was like a year ago.
Yeah, they don't. Well, it was a couple of years ago, but it was actually at that point just Yardbirds drummer was leading the group, but he'd always kind of been their business leader. Even in the early days, he was kind of the real force behind keeping them organized. So he was kind of the rightful heir to take over that spot. And for a while, he was doing the band with Paul Samuel Smith when they were Box of Frogs, and he continued with Chris Drasia. And so they pretty much had the nucleus of the original rhythm section for quite a while.
Anybody can keep it together for 50 years. You got to give them credit, or 55 years at this point, maybe longer.
Yeah, it's good. And but the Sloths I still play with, and they were just pretty much just a teenage band that was playing around the Sunset Strip. Not the best clubs either, kind of the Sea Witch and some of the secondary clubs. And they broke up. On one of the Back from the Grave albums, they put their single Makin' Love, which I have a reissue of here. I've been playing with them off and on for about 10 years now. Where's the best place? This is a reissue. Yeah, this is a reissue of their single. They had they were kids that went to Beverly Hills High School, one of the few garage bands from Beverly Hills. And I had known Michael Rummans from, forever. He was in the King Bees and he was in the Hollywood Stars. He bought my first amplifier, my 62 Fender Showman. I sold it to him a million years ago. But this single became quite a collector's item. The real copies of this.
So when did that come out? When did that come out?
This came out in 1965.
Oh, okay. This is really
yeah.
You're out back together then.
Yeah, and we got back together with the three living members, and I replaced one of the ones that wasn't around anymore.
So the 55th reunion tour.
It was kind of like that. Well, what was happening is the original copies were actually selling for $6,000 and up.
Holy crap.
So it became one of the rarest garage singles of all time.
And they didn't do an album, just a 45.
The group actually did an album, recently, a few years back. But yeah, just the 45, and they mimeographed the picture sleeves at Beverly Hills High. And so those were, because it wasn't getting released. And there was actually the Gories covered the song. And so when we first started playing together, we were paired up with the Gories, which was fun. And we both played the song back to back. And it was a couple of the original members. The group kind of continued after the single for a while. And a couple of the people wound up in Doug Yule's version of the Velvet Underground. His pretty much last incarnation of it while they were still playing around New York. So the group kind of has these tentacles that go as far as Frank Zappa, who was working with the band in their later years,
really
in the 60s. It's pretty fun. And then Mike Rummins was in the Yellow Pages, and he left the group to do that. But I still see a lot of those people that are still milking the 60s as much as possible. I was with Davie, Allan, and the Arrows for quite a few years.
The great surf guitarist, right?
Yeah, he was a surf guitar player until he discovered the fuzz pedal. He did the soundtrack to The Wild Angels and most of those Roger Corman biker movies, Glory Stompers, a lot of the first Billy Jack movie, Born Losers. He did a great soundtrack.
Billy Jack, that was great.
Yeah, he did the first one was called Born Losers, and Davie did that soundtrack. But he became kind of like the king of fuzztone. To fuzztone, he was what Dick Dale was to surf guitar.
Fuzz.
Yeah, he's still alive and still playing.
Yeah, I see him around social media once in a while.
Yeah, he's
still around.
He's still around. But that was really good. But he's one of those guys that just Mike Curb wouldn't even let the band tour because he needed them in the studio to keep cranking out movie soundtracks. Yeah, they did one tour of teenage fairs across the country. They went out with the Music Machine and the Turtles on a tour which doesn't suck. That's
the Turtles. That's cool. So you played with them in LA clubs, but you didn't really tour with those guys?
I did Europe with them too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What decade was that?
That was in the 90s, but it was.
I think of your career in decades and maybe centuries.
I don't even keep track of time anymore. It's this COVID thing, starting to look like Andy Warhol.
That's a little. If you bleach that out a little bit, you would be a perfect Andy Warhol.
Yeah, my hair's like
that might be a good gig.
Yeah.
So should we go back to the times of like the Textones and that whole? That was a kind of the fame and fortune of your career goes way back then, I guess.
Yeah, it's been over pretty much since then.
Not at all. You're on my channel for one thing, so that must mean you're pretty important.
In the 70s, I was playing mostly rhythm and blues, and I played in a lot of bands with horn sections where we had to do steps, and I didn't really get into a lot of the hard rock stuff of the 60s, and then when disco came around, I was actually in a Broadway production of Jacques Bareilles' Alive and Well. The production here in Los Angeles.
Playing guitar, you mean?
Yeah, playing guitar.
Not dancing.
No, not then. They had real dancers, but and I thought it was pretty much over. I thought there was no hope for music, but then after seeing Patti Smith really early on, and getting into bands like Television. It kind of basically saved me, because the whole do-it-yourself ethic that was coming out, there really were a lot of really good pro players in some of those early punk bands that were kind of having to dumb down a little bit to be authentically punk. But I think that there were a lot of fine musicians that were all of a sudden thrust into the punk scene, and they were having fun with it, a lot of eighth notes.
Yeah, that's a little surprising, because a rock guitar player who can play 3 chords, but a punk guy can only play 2 chords. But in reality, they might know all the chords, and they just got to stick with the punk aesthetic, I guess.
Yeah, and you had to pick your spots. I went to one of the earliest gigs of Black Flag. They were playing on Ventura Boulevard in a Fern bar, and I had met Keith Morris.
Fern bar.
Yeah, I had met Keith Morris, who is just one of the most lovely human beings, seriously, you'd ever meet. And he invited me out. And Greg Ginn was playing guitar with them then. And they played Louie Louie. And I was kind of upset because he was playing the 5 chord as a major. And I went up and corrected him after the show. I said, in Louie Louie, the 5 chord is a minor. He looked at me in a very punkish, defiant way. He goes, so? and the next time I saw them, he had corrected it.
At least he wasn't playing it as a 7th chord.
Yeah, God forbid.
So Henry Rollins is a big jazz fan, a big vinyl collector. He talks about jazz and vinyl all the time. And
yeah, I like
to get him on the show.
I like Henry Rollins a lot for what he does as far as convincing people to listen to other things. I mean, what I play at home is, I've been working on gypsy jazz. I play a lot of bossa nova stuff, on guitar. I don't sit at home listening to punk rock all the time. People think because I play garage music that all I do is just listen to caveman music, just stomp stuff all the time.
You can hurt your brain doing that.
It's good. The real primitive stuff is still great, and I love it. But it's fun. But it becomes kind of something that you do, and I've always listened to jazz. Just I was in my high school jazz band.
So was I.
Yeah, on guitar, and it was great. Playing Sammy Nestico charts.
Sammy Nestico and Bill Hefty and Count Basie. We played the Monterey Jazz Festival multiple times. We had a really good band in Reseda.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, the high school competition version of the Monterey, and then whichever band wins gets to play at the festival. Yeah. So I did that 2 years in a row. That was amazing. That's
such a beautiful venue. Yeah, I went in 72. I actually saw a blues day at the Monterey Fairgrounds for the Jazz Fest. It was Bo Diddley and Mance Lipscomb, people but what a beautiful venue.
Monterey is beautiful. Everything up there is beautiful. That's why it's for the rich only.
Yeah. So any rate, so in the late 70s, I started playing with Carla Olson and Kathy Valentine. I had met Kathy when I was on tour with a Texas boogie band playing in Texas in 76. So I wind up in a band with her and Carla and Marcus Cuff, who had been Emmylou Harris's drummer, and we start playing around L.A. And one day, Kathy calls me. I was living in Toluca Lake, a place that I love very much. Nice. And I love Toluca Lake. So she calls me. She was living on Hacienda in Hollywood, right around the corner from Barney's Beanery over there off of Santa Monica. She goes, "I've got a song. Come over." And so I come over. She plays me the song that she had been writing working on for quite a while. And she had finished it, and I learned it, and I was like thinking that is really a really good song. So the first time we played it was at Chino Prison on a gig with the Plimsolls and the Plugs.
No way.
On Thanksgiving 1979, we debuted this song called Vacation. And
Vacation.
yeah,
That sounds like
so,
a real
yeah,
prison appropriate tune.
well, that was part of it. I think Kathy kind of, presented it as, here's something you won't be able to do for a while, kind of, introduction to it. So that was the first time that we played. This is like the journey of a song, goofy journey of a song. And so we wind up recording it we were recording at Shelter Studios, which I love that old studio on Hollywood Boulevard. It's no longer there. And we had cut some stuff. We were given a unreleased Tom Petty song called "I Can't Fight It." And we had this little one-off deal with Chiswick Records in England, who put out bands like The Damned were on Chiswick at that time. So it was a good label for us to be on. We were playing around Los Angeles, doing a lot, and playing in Texas too. We were going back, doing shows in Austin and Dallas and Houston, and they still kind of became like a Whiskey A Go-Go house band for about 6 months, opening for bands every weekend there. So we cut Vacation in about 3 hours, less than 3 hours, at a EMI's demo studio on Sunset. It comes out as the B-side of this record that we put out on Chiswick with this lovely artwork. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Not much of the artwork. It had a picture of us on the back.
Yeah,
And yeah. And so so we got some good dates because of that. We, were able to open for the Ramones, and we were,
really,
yeah, doing shows with Gang of Four and bands like that. Just because of having a record out, it works for every band pretty much.
Just have a record out.
Put a record out. Yeah, you can't even do festivals in Europe unless you have a recent release. Even if it's on the tiniest label, you're still able to
put it in your
yeah. Well,
your garage label.
Yeah, seriously, it's like that. So
the B side was bigger than the A side on that one.
No, it didn't really. But
they were both.
Kathy joins the Go-Go's. The other girls add their 2 cents worth on, get their name on the record, on their version. They change the chorus around. It becomes a big international hit. Kathy goes on to fame and fortune, and we become this weird footnote. And Vacation winds up on the Today Show every summer for their summer vacation segment. They were using it year after year on the summer version of the Today Show.
So she can retire off just the royalties of that one song, I guess.
Well,
more or less.
She wrote. We had also done "Can't Stop the World," which was another one that we had done early, one of her songs. But she had written quite a few songs for them. But the journey of the song, there winds up being a musical on Broadway about the Go-Go's. So the song takes yet another turn.
Oh my God!
And recently, Jerry Bruckheimer has a new TV show called Hightown, which is pretty good. It couldn't air on major network because it's just too violent, too much sex and drugs, all the the fun stuff that people like. So our version of Vacation is the theme song of Jerry Bruckheimer's new TV show now.
I saw you mention that on Facebook a while ago.
Yeah, and so
I didn't realize it was the Textones version. Yeah, it has a very different sound than the Go-Go's version.
It does. And so the moral of the story is, all you got to do is just record something obscure and wait 40 years, and eventually you'll get a paycheck for it.
Fame and fortune eventually rolls around.
Yeah, so
that's an amazing story of a top song.
Yeah, it's just peculiar. So
no one played you in the musical though.
No.
I
would have. I was hoping that maybe it would be somebody like Tommy Tune or Joel Gray or somebody, important. But no,
I would have gone to see it had they had a character playing Dave. But
I would have chosen Erica Estrada. It would have been.
I don't know.
Yeah,
bilingual. You want a Latino Dave Provost.
It would have been more suave. So I see the Medicine Show behind you.
Yeah,
and that was
over here.
That was quite.
That's when I met you. It was when you guys were recording this major label.
Yeah, that took a while. That took a while to record, that picture on the, I replaced Kendra, who I knew, who was,
Go this way.
yeah, Kendra Smith was kind of one of the icons of that whole Paisley Underground thing. For some reason at that time, she was very, very popular. And when she left, I came in as kind of a, you know, a session ringer kind of guy and wound up playing 100 gigs with them. We toured with U2. I did like 2.5 tours with them all together because
80, 83, 84, something like that.
Yeah.
84. This came out in 84.
Yeah.
Which is when I met you working at the record store.
Yeah.
What were you saying about the cover?
Really fun. Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. Was the cover.
The artwork.
We were playing a club. We were out promoting Days of Wine and Roses. Still, it was kind of the second leg of the Days of Wine and Roses tour that was at that point being distributed by Warner Brothers. It was kind of a big album on college radio. So we were going to go with Geffen Records. David Geffen had been really pushing for us to go with him, and he had been in New York when we were opening for U2. He had just arrived in New York. We were at the New York Palladium, and some U2 fan had crawled up on the marquee and stolen the 2 plastic letters that said U2. So there's huge crowd line of people down the block to get in, and it just said Dream Syndicate on the marquee. And so David Geffen, I met him at the New Music Seminar. He goes, "That was quite a crowd you guys had at the Palladium the other night." And I didn't want to correct him.
That's exactly just for us.
But at any rate, we were on our on tour, and we were playing in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we were playing a great venue called Joe's Star Lounge. And we were playing with Destroy All Monsters that, you know, that had real connections to Iggy and the Stooges, legendary Michigan band. And any rate, there's this older guy that was nicely dressed that came backstage, and he's talking to us about jazz. There's a broken water pipe spewing water all over us. He's getting drenched, and he's talking mostly to Dennis, our drummer, and they're talking about, just their favorite jazz drummers and jazz drumming. And the guy watches our set, and then we never see him again. Find out that he was Gil Friesen, the president of A&M, and he had flown out just to see us on just a pretty, normal night, not anything really spectacular. And then we hear he's interested in signing us. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were all jazz fans, and he was too.
Wow.
And so this goes to that album cover. They had been showing us various album artwork, and some of them we just didn't like. They were mostly variations on Dying Roses. I think it was Roses Dying on the Vine, a sequel to Days of Wine and Roses or something. And so the artwork wasn't good. And I went with Dennis one day to A&M, to the art department. They wanted to show us a cover, and they showed us that. And I think Dennis might have been crying a little bit. He was pretty upset. That was from a painting that Gil Friesen bought in Tibet from somebody in a cave in Tibet, and had brought it home. And he was insisting that was going to be the album cover. So it was, and it's an interesting cover. I don't hate it, but it probably wasn't,
That's from an artist in Tibet, not an LA art gallery person?
No, that was an artist in Tibet that Gil Friesen had purchased, and he figured he was going to get his money's worth.
I think he wanted to get a tax write-off for the buying the painting. More if it was expensive. It's a cool cover, but it's stands alone as not being part of any kind of, where does it fit in?
Yeah, it doesn't. But that whole album is just kind of a standalone piece of really interesting strangeness. That album doesn't really it was not the typical follow up from an album like Days of Wine and Roses, which is an album that I absolutely love. And we went into a studio for many months in San Francisco, the Automat with Sandy Pearlman, who had just recently had produced The Clash, and he had done The Dictators, a lot of really great bands. But and Blue Oyster Cult, he was, very famous for BOC.
Is he the guy who said more cowbell?
Yeah, he was friends with everybody at SNL too. He even had Father Guido Sarducci come out and bless our first session of the medicine show, which was pretty funny. but Sandy's no longer with us. He's moved on. But so the album took a really long time, and a lot of just creative back and forth between Carl, our guitar player, and Steve Wynn. But during that time, I had a weekend free and went back to Los Angeles, and I did that album that's right behind you, that Stone Cold World album.
Grab this.
That was done pretty much in a weekend with Earl Mankey, and it came out exactly the same time as the Medicine Show, and a lot of it got released in Europe on a German label. That's the band's homemade cover. PVC Records put it out in the United States with a glossier cover, colorized, and it was just a homemade record, and I was really proud of it.
Did you write some of the tunes on here? Who's the main songwriter here?
Well, Rick Alvin and Roger Clay still, and I still play with those guys. It's been many years. Haven't
they done like a dozen records since then?
Yeah, and we actually did a CD recently. I should have it around, but it was actually really good. With Dave Klein, who's the drummer of Agent Orange, is a producer engineer, has his own studio. He actually drummed on the new record. He does a lot of really good hardcore punk and surf bands. And so it was fun. But that was done with Earl Mankey. That was the first album we did with Earl Mankey. And I would take a bullet for Earl Mankey. I love the guy. He's just, and I really loved Sparks. He was the original guitar player of Sparks. Oh,
I didn't know that. Is he he's still around doing stuff in LA?
Yeah. Actually,
Don't fall.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
But
I'll rearrange this.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, actually, Earl mixed a song I was playing recently. I saw you recently, a couple of years ago, when I was playing with Jennifer Dixon. Fur Dixon. I didn't
know Fur came from Jennifer, but yeah, we saw you with a little Tarzana club.
Yeah, and Fur had been the first bass player of the Cramps. And it wasn't a long-lived gig but it was a memorable one because that was kind of really the height of their the Day with Elvis period that she toured with them in Europe and stuff. And I'd known for forever. And we had Dusty Watson from the Sonics who was playing drums with us. And that group has kind of been in hibernation for some time, but that was fun. But Earl Mankey actually worked on that recording we did. He actually mixed the first song on that, so it was kind of nice just to. So you
guys did a record. You did a record with Fur, or just a single?
No, we did a single and a full album. It's really fantastic.
Did you tour with them?
We went to Europe. I did a tour of England with Fur. That was 2 summers ago. I guess we're in summer now, and so that was summer of 2000.
Bring it up to 2000. But that was the first time I seen you in many years when we hung out at the Tarzana Club. That was probably 2 years ago.
That's a great little club. The Maui Sugar Mill, they have big people that secretly.
I saw John Doe of X play there. I was like this close to him, and who else did I see? I can't even remember. Somebody.
Joe Bonamassa plays out there, and
because this guy Cadillac Zach produces the blues thing on Monday nights.
Yeah,
And he gets people like Joe Bonamassa and all those heavy duty guitar wizard guys.
Yeah, I think he's trying to have a monopoly on all the blues that comes into Los Angeles, and
he is the blues meister. Yeah,
I love blues, but I'd hate to be. I've had a couple of really good offers to play in real, honest to God, like headlining blues bands playing bass. One recently that was going to be 200 gigs a year. Wow. Touring all over the world, and I didn't want to do that. I'm just too old to do 10 gigs in in a row. I mean, I know from this last tour with Fur that it's a lot of work doing doing city after city.
It's a young man's game.
You know what? I probably play better now than I did when I was younger. This COVID thing has been really good for learning songs that I always wanted to learn.
Practicing, yeah. I'm not practicing my guitar enough, but my son is in the other room playing his new jazz bass we got him. He's learning all kinds of songs.
Good choice.
Maybe you should give him a couple of lessons or something.
I know he's been playing for quite a while.
Yeah, he's been playing more sax than bass, but he's trying to get into bass.
You play one instrument, and bass is basically a one note instrument too, one note at a time instrument like sax too. So he's walking into it with a pretty good foundation. Let's talk about vinyl.
Finally, vinyl. For you vinyl fans out there, we said we'd get to it eventually. What have you got to show us that's amazing and new and exciting, or not?
Nothing. I just wanted to talk about vinyl.
Okay. It's round, it's black, it's got a hole in the middle.
No, I love records immensely. And I worked as a rare record buyer for a store for a decade.
A store here that I would know in LA?
Yeah.
You worked at a lot of record stores.
Well,
a few.
Kind of. The place that you and I worked together was the most fun.
That was a fun year, 84.
And I just love all the people, and I'm glad that a lot of us are still around. Yeah. And it was definitely a blast. But for Record Surplus, actually Ronnie Barnett from the Muffs has been working there as their rare record buyer. So if anybody's selling anything obscure, rare, go see Ronnie.
Well, they used to be on Pico, probably when you worked there, and then they moved the store to Santa Monica Boulevard.
We were owned by Rose Records out of Chicago, and so at one time we actually had 10 record surpluses here in Los Angeles and one in Des Plaines in Illinois. And so but yeah, at that point we were just buying everything we could, and there were some pretty fun. I remember buying Merv Griffin's record collection with a couple of people I worked at the Valley store. That was one of the most stellar collections, especially of soundtracks I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And duplicates, just fantastic. And then we also bought one of the crummiest collections from a celebrity. When Sammy Davis died, I guess his wife had put a lot of his records in hiding. And, a lot of stuff. And eventually the stuff wound up, people gave up on it. And the guy that owned the storage place was losing money hanging on to it. So he was the guy that sold us this stuff. It looked like autographs had been fished out of it already. So for the most part, there weren't any great, love you, Sammy, Frank kind of, there weren't any of those. There were a couple in there of cool autographs, but for the most part, it was one of the worst, lamest record collections that I'd ever seen in my life. You figure
Sammy didn't have good taste, or what?
I don't know if he had time to actually sit around and listen to music, but the one rock band he had the most of was Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and that was like kind of as like hip as he got. He had
slightly jazzy.
Yeah, it wasn't really good. And I'm not trying to put Sammy down because we all love Sammy, but it was not the best.
Disappointing. Merv had better stuff, huh? Did Merv like jazz?
He liked everything, and I think what it was is he decided to keep things in good condition.
He was one of the wealthiest guys in LA because he produced all these massive shows,
Oh yeah, yeah. I love
Jeopardy, and
Yeah,
he's close to being like a billionaire. So he had everything. He had like the biggest house in. Anyway, you know the story.
he had one of the best TV bands too. You know,
Oh yeah,
he had Herb Ellis on guitar. He had Ray Brown on bass. It was just stellar,
Ray Brown,
stellar,
right?
yeah, stellar band that he had too. But
Did he have was Jack Sheldon on his band, or was that Mike Douglas? Remember Jack Sheldon on trumpet?
yeah, I love the Mike Douglas band. They were really they're arranged. Why are we talking about Mike Douglas?
Ancient history. You brought up Merv Griffin. You were selling records. You bought Merv's collection. I didn't know this interview was going to go into Merv Griffin.
I didn't. Everything eventually goes into Merv Griffin.
In LA, it certainly does.
Yeah.
But Rare Records, Record Surplus. They had the LA. They had the Van Nuys store briefly.
Yeah, it was really good.
And you played there. You played there with who? Davie Allan.
Oh,
I saw you did a concert there, and I didn't find out till like the day after. I was kind of
annoyed. Davie Allan, we played Rhino Records, and we actually played at Aaron Records when they moved to from their location on Fairfax over to Highland, I believe. We played there too. Those were just fun. Those, we're friends, and we knew the people that worked there. So, I love doing record store in-store appearances, but they're always tough because you're in a fishbowl. So you really can't get very arena, when you have people leaning up against you. It's one of those things where you have to move so people can look in the bins.
I'm trying to get over to see the, you're in the way of the rap section. Can you move out of the way? We saw you play at like the tiniest record store in Reseda that time. The place only holds like 6 people. What was that store called?
Bebop.
I don't remember. Oh, Bebop.
Bebop was one of those places.
Richard, is that Kip's? What's his name?
Kip had Ear Candy.
Ear Candy.
And Kip was out at Moby Disc for a long time. And Kip is a really good guitar player. He's had bands, and he was even playing with David Marks in the Marksmen. David Marks was the original Beach Boy guitar player. And,
I did not know that.
Yeah, and but no, Kip is.
We see him at the place in Tarzan all the time. The record store.
Yeah, he really knows records. It's such a big community, just worldwide. I kind of lost interest when stores started mostly selling CDs. I moved to Austin, Texas in 2000 just to get out of LA for a while, and had friends in Austin, and I thought it would be a really neat change to, and I went to work for a record store there that was only CDs, and it was painful for me not to actually, there's something about holding a record. Here's a record, obscure one. Holding a record, just the feel of it, the smell of vinyl, opening it up for the first time. A lot of people that had albums, and especially in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people, that was the only artwork they would ever experience or own in their lifetime. And CDs were just not the same thing for me.
Yeah,
so I
worked for a CD store at that same time in Encino. It was CDs only. They thought that was so groundbreaking when they didn't know the whole world would go. But I hear you. Yeah, I put my records away for a few years, but took them all back out. Now I have, I'm ashamed to say, like 6 turntables. Every room in the house. I have turntables, records.
I have one of those self-contained things that's bigger than life itself. It doesn't have a TV, but it's a big console hi-fi.
The entertainment units in the 50s, you had TV, records, and booze cabinet, and that was your entire entertainment world right there. Booze in the same cabinet.
Yeah. What else? What else do you need?
Exactly.
Maybe a blender. That would be it.
Well, was there something you had?
But no, there's something.
You brought out the Beach Boys for a second.
Yeah,
there.
this was actually. Yeah, it's actually an album that was really, really important to me. Just growing up, I was exposed to so much. My mom and my cousin Marie, who lived with us when I was a kid, were R&B collectors. So I had a real huge dose of soul music growing up. It was just, and they would take me to, see Bo Diddley every chance, Ray Charles, all these great soul, people. So I grew up listening to James Brown heavily and still believe it's one of the best bands that's ever existed. And then my dad playing on country sessions at the same time. It was kind of, Bakersfield country in the house. So I was getting a pretty good mix of Wynn Stewart and Buck Owens and James Brown simultaneously. So those things are just really pretty inspiring,
Both sides.
A lot of, but Pet Sounds was one of those records that when it came out, I bought, and it was a little bit too mature for my tastes. And then a few years later, in the early 70s, when I moved with a girlfriend to Santa Barbara, all of a sudden, all the songs made sense. It was like a young guy moving out on his own and having to deal with the world. And it became a very important record to me. And I know a lot of people love it. And it's best never to discuss Brian Wilson. If you work at a record store, never bring up the Beatles, Brian Wilson, or Todd Rundgren, because you will be in an 8-hour conversation with fanatics that will never end, and so you learn to avoid. Yeah, everybody's an expert on that, but I really do.
We watched the movie about Brian Wilson recently, Love and Mercy. I don't know if you saw that, but it kind of talks about his mental issues, and he was putting together Pet Sounds, and the rest of the band thought he was a little loony with these ideas and barking dogs and oboes and stuff, and had to bring in the studio musicians to play the parts. So that was like such a weird album for the Beach Boy fan at the time, but it turned out to be this concept album. It was, I guess, ahead of its time.
It really holds up, and it inspired a lot of other. And I have a friend whose dad was playing banjo at a pizza parlor on Hollywood Boulevard, and kind of not even a good banjo player.
Sweet,
and Brian
that's
was
a
eating
sweet gig.
Yeah, and Brian was eating a pizza there. He said, "You're coming with me," and he dragged him off to be on. The guy only recorded one record in his life, and it's Pet Sounds.
Well, that's a good resume.
I guess.
Sweet and short.
Yeah, from pizza to.
So I got the long list of Dave Provost credits here. Did you do something with Gene Clark later at the end of his career there?
Yeah,
from the Byrds.
Yeah,
amazing songwriter.
He is just one of the most beautiful songwriters that's ever lived, and that voice is just incredible. And it was through Korla. I've remained, close friends with Korla Olson since we, for over 40 years now. And Korla brought me on board for that. Actually, I'd played with him even earlier. We had done like McCabe's earlier, and I kind of got to know Gene, and I really disagreed with him on most things like religion, politics, but there was a lot that that I really loved about the guy. And one time, I think it was the first time we played McCabe's. We were playing "Set You Free" this time. That is one of my favorite songs ever written. I love that song from the day that I got that second Byrds album. And he's looking around for his harmonica to play at the end of the song, and I had learned that back in junior high, back in the '60s, that harmonica part. And I grabbed the harmonica, and he's looking at me. I thought he wanted me to play the solo, so I actually played the solo to "Set You Free," note for note, exactly like he had done on the original record. I didn't realize that after the record came out, he promptly changed that solo to something else that he does. So we're still in the middle of the show. He reaches over. I'm putting the harmonica back on the. He grabs my hand with the harmonica in it. He squeezes my hand until that harmonica almost folds in half. I didn't have any feeling in that hand for about a month. And he had a kind of a somewhat angry side, you know. Stern man.
You pissed off Gene Clark over a harmonica solo.
I'm sure that wasn't the first time, but
learned your lesson.
No, I really love the guy, and he really amazing talent. I had the experience of staying up with him all night while he was writing a song, and just watching how he would go over every little nuance of the song until it was just perfect. He was not one of these guys that would just throw together some words. Everything had to be completely perfect. And he, playing the same song over and over again. And each time he would just change one little nuance of the song. He's really I know that a lot of people think he's a totally messed up guy. And I know that part of the Ozarks, as you do.
From Missouri.
Yeah, you're familiar with that, and I think that his Ozark upbringing really messed him up pretty badly as far as just a certain amount of Ozarkian guilt that he carried, religious upbringing and weird things.
I have more Jewish guilt than Ozark guilt, but I get the sentiment.
You're lucky because you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, even some Catholic guilt. So was he composing on guitar, not piano?
No,
just curious.
He was a guitar. Gene was a really good guitar player in one aspect of guitar. If anybody ever learned guitar out of a Mel Bay book, in the folk book in the early '60s, and they learned the alternating bass and where you would actually lead to the next chord with a little bass figure in the cowboy chords. He was a master of that style. I mean, he really clean guitar player, and he never gets any credit. I mean, he definitely didn't know a single jazz chord, but he that Mel Bay style.
Do you know where Mel Bay was from?
No.
Mel Bay's original music store is in St. Louis, and that's where I bought my first guitar, and my first guitar lessons was in this little music store, Mel Bay. That's where it is, the publishing empire, this little guitar store in St. Louis. Well, you happen to mention the Missouri and Mel Bay all in the same.
All your background, but that's
my sad story.
Well, that explains his Mel Bay thing. But it's funny because a lot of those people that were kind of survivors from the '60s that did manage to make it into other decades are all pretty colorful. They're very defined characters as far as almost comic bookish. Sky Saxon was one of them. I worked with Sky, and he was kind of, to me, the opposite of Gene Clark. As far as Sky never from minute to minute knew what he was going to do. Everything was just this spontaneity, childlike adventure of just goofiness, And I think that he's one of those people that could convince people that he knows what he's doing, even when he didn't, And I think there's a certain beauty in that too, as far as the real garage mentality.
It's confidence, being able to convince everybody. Yeah. Pure confidence and charisma.
Yeah, but I've worked with some people from even before then. One of the greatest musicians that I've ever in my life, one of the greatest experiences was working with the late Dale Hawkins. And Dale, most famous for Susie Q, writing Susie Q and having the original hit, but he was really the first white artist on Chess Records, and he did so much. And he introduced the world to James Burton, his guitar player, Roy Buchanan, Joe Osborne, all these great legendary players that started with Dale Hawkins.
Did you record with him or tour with him?
No, just live dates in the Northwest. I was living in Portland, Oregon, in the later half of the 2000s, and I loved Portland. But during that time, I was in a band that was backing a lot of rockabilly artists, and we toured with Sleepy LeBeef, which was really a fun time because he's this human jukebox that you never has a set list. You can do. I don't think we ever repeated the same song during the whole string of dates that we did in the Northwest. But Dale Hawkins was really just fantastic as an early guy. Last few years, I've been recording just sporadic recording with Freddie Cannon. Who, one of the early rockers, and we've got DJ Bonebreak on drums.
From X.
Yeah, and I love playing with DJ. I've known him for a long time. This isn't the weirdest thing that DJ and I ever did together either. We actually played as the rhythm section for Korla Pandit on Korla Pandit's very last performance.
That's the like Indian guy who does like meditational.
Korla had one of the earliest TV shows in Los Angeles. He would play this hypnotic music. It didn't cost a lot. All you needed was a guy in a turban and a light bulb and a Hammond organ. But he'd play this hypnotic kind of, trance music, and supposedly housewives would leave their husbands because they would be hypnotized by this music.
And that's like one of the weirdest records I guess it came out in the 60s with him and the big Swami thing.
Yeah, he had a few records.
I see that record in the store and I'm like, what is this? And it's kind of a trippy music to meditate by.
He has a cult following, and he was actually a pretty good musician himself. But luckily, he was one of these people that got to see his cult stardom while he was still alive. A lot of people never, they get rediscovered. Like Gene Clark, we'd play and there'd be 30 guys in the audience, at McCabe's, and they were there because they thought that it was hot tuna night. There'd be like 8 teeth between the whole crowd, and we'd be playing there, and then they get Gene to sign autographs. But now Gene has hundreds of thousands of fans. If the guy had just held on for a while.
Yeah, it's a shame. But did McCabe's? I heard McCabe's might be closing or is closing. McCabe's is the guitar store in LA, for those who don't know, and they had a lot of live, great acoustic type sets. I've seen a lot of good sets there.
Yeah.
I heard they were in trouble.
Yeah, it's probably hard. It's a mom and pop store. And so I wish them well. They've definitely done a lot of great things with their live presentation. And they have been a source of, sheet music for a long time, for instructional methods for people that want to learn dulcimer at 4 a.m.
Yeah, all the weird acoustic instruments. That's kind of the center hub of acoustic guitars and mandolins and the folk rock scene around it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I've never owned an acoustic guitar because I've got a horrible phobia about acoustic guitars. I've had to play them on recordings, but it's
phobia. What's going to happen? The string's going to break or something, or?
No, when I somewhere around 1965, I had a Stella, 1928 Stella with nylon strings that I actually got back 50 years later. And I took it over to a friend's house that was a drummer, and as it sounded really good until he came in and started playing, and I was rendered helpless. It was a complete loss of control kind of issue. And I never felt more helpless that I couldn't cut over the sound of a drummer. And I was like, I can never do this. It's got to be electric instruments from now on.
Yeah, with people. I guess when you're playing with other people, it's.
Yeah, and I heard that Billy Gibbons has never owned an acoustic guitar. I don't know if that's true or not, but somebody says he's just.
I didn't own one until 20 plus years into playing. I have an inexpensive Martin, but I've got a dozen electrics, and that's mostly my thing too. It's weird because most people start on acoustic. Electric's easier to start on because it's easier to get your, the strings are easier to push around. But a lot of people don't do that.
I'm around a lot of garage fans, and it's been a younger generation over the last 10 years playing with the Sloths and the Yellow Pages. And my best pal, Shelly Gantz, he and I kind of resurrected the Unclaimed, and with Lee Joseph, who was one of the early members, and we were playing around for Shelley's still continuing the band, but had to get Shelley out of retirement. He hadn't played in a long time, but that's pretty authentic as far as they were a pretty important band, at least on the West Coast, as far as the whole garage revival. It's kind of like what Greg Prevost was doing with the Chesterfield Kings on the East Coast. I love a lot of those bands. The Liars were monumentally fantastic from Boston. Fuzztones were, are kind of one of those bands that we were on the same label in Germany. Every time we'd go over to play in Germany with the Droogs, we'd hear about the Fuzztones because they would have been in the same city the night before. And it's always, Rudy did this and Rudy did that. We got so sick about hearing about the Fuzztones. But
had to follow them around, huh?
Yeah, but the Miracle Workers, there were a lot of those bands. I think there was a big separation between the so-called Paisley underground bands and the real authentic 60s driven garage bands that were more, stomping cave stuff. And
rougher sound versus the sort of mellower, jangly rock sound.
Yeah, I've always subscribed to the pagan pounding beat because I think that's more authentic to the rock and roll. So
rock and roll is about jumping around and no, I agree.
Yeah.
You want to be an intellectual, go listen to jazz or classical music.
Done a lot of shows opening for the Sonics over the, and for a while there, it was a lot of the original members until just, about 2 years ago. And they're just such a fantastic band, one of the great American rock bands. And they're, for anybody that's not familiar, I'm sure all your people are really familiar with them, but they're just incredible. Jerry Rosley and the Sonics. And
they're LA based though? Mostly?
Seattle, actually, they were around the same time that the Beatles were forming out of Seattle. They came out of the same scene that had the Kingsmen, the Fabulous Wailers, to set them aside from Bob Marley's Wailers, but Dawn and the Good Times. They were the same scene that gave us the Paul Revere and the Raiders. The Paul Revere.
You've played in so many scenes, Dave. All the scenes on the West Coast. Is there a scene anymore? Is there going to be a scene when we get back to work here after COVID?
I'm not sure. I was having a lot of people because I've been juggling a bunch of instrumental bands, and I've been playing with Nolan Porter, who was a soul singer that wasn't. He was on ABC Records, Dunhill, in the early '70s, and he did some really, really good recordings, but never made it in the United States. But he became a huge hero in that northern soul scene in England. And Paul Weller's covered his, one of his tunes and stuff. And it's what was the band division? Actually, based one at the time. Any rate, so I've been juggling a lot of different bands, and they're all in different genres, and it's fun to just get out and play. But these people are calling me to come and get together and rehearse, and they don't seem to have anybody that wants to subscribe to getting together in a rehearsal room with a bunch of degenerate musicians, who might be very germy people.
Yeah, you don't want to put masks on. Are you doing any of this online stuff for music, or just your
No, I don't know. I don't know how, well, one thing is you discover that you can't play at the same time unless you have very advanced, equipment because of the latency. Yeah.
It doesn't work for latency at all.
Yeah. And I think that's problematic, but I think a lot of us wanted to. And then we realized that without an audience, it's a whole different, not that we would be presumptuous enough to assume that we'd actually have an audience on the best,
This type of thing is a solo. I mean, if you can pull that off and just pick up and play and sing.
I would do that. My idea of a solo thing, I would just do stand-up comedy.
Hey, you could be on my channel stand-up comedy if you don't want to
No,
start shooting
no,
shit.
I'm way more comfortable with stand-up than I would be with some folk guitar singing. They called the wind Mariah. I just
We would pay a little bit to see Dave doing stand-up for sure.
well, it would be better. But at any rate, so
Were you involved in a comedy TV show at one point? Did you tell me a story about a very popular
yeah,
TV show?
a friend of mine that was a record buyer. He had a TV show that was canceled. He had a show called Dream On that was actually, the critics loved it. His name is Kevin Bright, and he really, really lovely guy, just one of my favorite people. And he also did the history of white people in America, which was a Martin Mull thing that he had won all sorts. He had won all sorts of awards. It was just really one of those well-loved things. And he was moving. His show got canceled. He and his wife were expecting twins, and he was moving back east again. Just couldn't handle LA. And then he gets a call saying they love your idea of your new TV show, Friends. And so he became the creator with Martha Kaufman, of Friends. But he was like pretty much the main guy behind that whole thing. And he made a few bucks off of that. And they were having trouble with Lisa Kudrow, who was not the best guitar player on the planet. And they were having, because they would shoot the show twice, back to back. And then they take the best portions of each episode. And I had mentioned that because I've had a lot of guitar students, and I love to teach both guitar and bass. And it's something that I really enjoy. And Kevin brought me on board to give guitar lessons to Lisa Kudrow, which meant having to go to the rehearsals of the show during the week, and then I'd get like 15 minutes here and there to try to teach her another chord. And she was not, part of the reason they brought me on was to hover over her, because she was doing that thing of she'd hit a chord and then she'd say, no, wait. And then she'd hit the next chord. Beginners, no, wait. Right. Yeah, and then she'd just find the chord and she'd play it. And they were going nuts because that was really, to shoot the show live and have to redo her segments was really expensive. The show didn't cost a lot to produce until those people started making $1 million an episode, then it became an expensive show. But it was all shot on one soundstage, just, same sets, all just like a train set up. But so one thing I didn't realize until about a week ago, that somebody told me that she was actually left-handed and playing the guitar. And it had never dawned on me that she had done that. I have no idea why, but could you imagine, all of a sudden having to switch to, not that she wasn't exactly ambidextrous, but she did start playing better afterwards.
You taught her upside down without knowing it, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, she wasn't really the best student in the world. She was kind of like, I'm making millions. Why do I need to play better?
Didn't she only do one or two songs on the show?
No, she did a bunch. But she one time looked at me and said, "But Jack Benny, he didn't play good, and he was really popular." And I was, I'm thinking he owned a Stradivarius. He was really a concert level player, but he dumbed down, on the show. He for real. He was a real player. I didn't want to say that. One thing that kind of scared her off from playing is I said, you're the most visible guitar player in the world. I said,
that's scary.
More people see you playing guitar on one episode worldwide than have probably seen B.B. King in his entire career.
Scared the hell out of her with that comment.
And I said, do you know how many young players are inspired to play because of you? That was more pressure. It was kind of like me saying, I don't want to do this, please. I eventually had to leave because I was just kind of going nuts doing it. And I went, to the producers of the show, and I said, she just doesn't want to get better. Her Yamaha guitar was so miserable, this guitar that she was using. I said, one thing is get her a better guitar. So I went and got her a Guild. to play. She used it on 2 episodes, and it was a much better improvement. Somebody at Gibson saw that she was using a guild, and they knew that Chris Isaak was coming on as a guest, on the show. So somebody at Gibson had the foresight to giving Chris Isaak a Gibson to give to her. So of course, when a handsome guy like Chris Isaak gives her a Gibson, she's all excited about it. She's using it. But I had already gone to Fender and told them who owned Guild.
Losing your sound.
Somebody was riding a motorcycle through your living room.
Yes, you heard that? I can't believe you heard that. I'm in a quiet residential street. I can hear stuff. But a motorcycle did just go by.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah, it sounded like a Davie Allan record. Any rate, so Lisa was, and then I go on tour, and I'm in England, and people are coming up to me, and they don't want to know anything about, like, these are garage people. They go, "Tell me about Lisa Kudrow." And I'm like, we're not like best friends or anything.
She's the interview.
This kind of problematic.
Final act, definitely. Yeah. So you were the guitar teacher to the most famous guitar player in the world at one point. Did not know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, hardly.
Famous.
I think I did eventually teach her C major 7 chord.
Only 1 or 2 chords. So Dave, do you have anything to plug? Any websites, any accounts we should be following, any merch? Or you're just Dave right now?
I'm Dave. I have a Sloth mug. I think there's one of these in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for sale. I can sell it.
Well, if you got anything websites or anything like that,
merch-wise, Chiswick reissued our single of Vacation because of the TV show. It's weird being on a theme song of a TV show. It's just one of those Hollywood goals.
That's HBO, I think.
It's actually
Showtime.
Stars.
Oh, okay. I don't get that either.
Yeah.
But the trailer can be seen here on YouTube, though. I checked.
Okay. Yeah, they actually edited the trailer. Yeah, the trailer has something different. There's actually a video clip of the show opening. That's a separate deal that has our song on it. But they did some serious editing, and it was pretty creative. Editing they couldn't have done 40 years ago without a razor blade. The digital editing is really
like I have here on Zoom. Who's in that show? Is there any big stars in that show? You maybe told me, I forgot.
I'll tell you, I watched the one free episode that they give you if you don't have stars. I think I watched it on Hulu or something.
We'll have to watch that.
It got picked up for a second season. Yeah.
I think we should get ready to wrap up here. We've kept these people on the line for over an hour, but you probably have another 5 hours worth of stories we'll get to next time we get together.
I didn't want to get into anything that's too risque, so I had to edit pretty much everything.
We could. You gave us all the G-rated stuff.
Yeah.
And the PG-rated is much bigger, but.
Yeah,
Dave,
thank you. It's good to see you, and
it's great. You are just a wealth of knowledge about the entire music and rock and roll business going back a few decades. So loved having you. Hope we get to see you play live soon, as soon as the world goes back to normal.
Yeah, I have hopes that maybe something good will happen at the next election, and we'll get back to some sort of
a state of normalcy or not.
Yes, I look forward to that. Yes.
Okay, but, Dave.
Good to see you.
Yeah, and, thanks.
And those free lessons for your son, Stan.
Yeah, I'm going to go tell him down the hallway that he better take advantage of that.
Yeah,
learn some scales.
I'll show him everything I know in 15 minutes.
Okay, good. That's all we have time for.
Okay. Well,
Dave. Yeah, thanks. We'll check you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Have fun.
Guys, that was Dave Provost on live from Culver City, California. Thanks for watching. I will put some links down at the bottom to some of Dave's projects, and please consider subscribing to the Vinyl Rundown. And thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe.